My name no longer matters. Since I fled from Neuralink, I left everything behind: my life, my identity, my ambitions. For 5 years, I worked as the head of security for one of the world's most secretive and advanced companies, but I discovered something that no human should ever know. I tried to move on, to ignore the dark memories haunting my nights, but it's impossible. The cold corridors of Neuralink, the figures in the shadows, the oppressive silence of the nights, they follow me like a shadow, an unending nightmare. Now, I feel the terror of being hunted myself. What I saw at Neuralink isn't just corporate secrets. They are deep, cruel, and inhuman abysses that defy logic and even reality itself. During the first few months, I convinced myself it was just a demanding but thrilling job. I was alongside the most influential man on the planet, Elon Musk, surrounded by advanced technology and secret experiments. But there was something more, something hidden in the shadows, a darkness that seemed alive. When I fled, I thought I was leaving that hell behind, but the truth is, it still haunts me today. I can't escape the images, the voices, the strange figures I saw, the dark power that seems to permeate everything surrounding Elon Musk. This man, so admired and feared, isn't who people think he is. He carries a coldness that transcends human nature, as if something foreign is rooted within him, something he encountered elsewhere. No matter how hard I try to forget, his words and his dark gaze linger in my mind. Sometimes I even wonder if he knows where I am, if he's watching me in a way I can't understand. When I talk about Musk, I feel as though he's watching me in some distant and inhuman way. It's as if he knows I've seen too much, as if he's waiting to pull me back under his control. Working for him was like touching an abyss I'll never escape from. I know I shouldn't be telling this, but the terror I live with daily is unbearable. What Neuralink and Musk are hiding is a threat to sanity itself. The secrets, the forces they're meddling with, something in them changed me forever. Since the day I walked through Neuralink's doors, my life fell apart. I feel I've carried something darker than just memories with me. Every sound around me, every shadow in the room where I'm hiding seems part of a plot I can't comprehend. The company, with its power and technology, was never what it seemed. And I, foolishly, thought I could leave unscathed, but Musk and his inhuman secrets leave marks that can't be erased. Everything that was once my life was ripped from me. I know these words may sound like madness, but anyone who's seen what I've seen no longer doubts. The nights have become my greatest enemy, for in the dark, all these horrors seem to come alive. Running is futile. The danger isn't there anymore at Neuralink. It's here, inside my mind, in the silence of the night, which transforms into something living. What I experienced in that company is no longer a corporate secret. It's a burden, a weight I'm not sure I can bear much longer. This is my truth. When I was hired, I thought it was a dream come true. Working alongside Elon Musk and ensuring the security of his visionary projects seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. From the first day, the imposing environment and the reverent silence of the employees left a strong impression on me. Neuralink's structure was grand, cold, as if every detail was designed to intimidate and command respect. I kept my focus on watching the facility, observing the workings of that seemingly well-oiled machine. However, something felt wrong in the air, something I couldn't yet identify. Seeing Musk for the first time shattered the image I had of him. He wasn't the charismatic visionary from the interviews. There was something colder, more calculated in his demeanor and inhuman aura. He walked the corridors without smiling, without interacting with anyone, as if the people around him were merely pieces. The intensity of his gaze was unsettling, almost as if he could see beyond the surface of things, as if he knew what each person was thinking. This perception soon left me uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore it. The job seemed simple at first: monitor cameras, patrol the halls, and make sure everything was in order. It seemed like a straightforward job, with no major challenges. But over time, I realized my task involved more than physical security. I wasn't just there to protect doors and ordinary secrets. Musk's safety was of a different kind, and something told me he already knew what I would eventually discover. The nights seemed longer, and I felt my every move was being watched. Gradually, I began to realize that Musk, even without directly interacting with me, kept a sort of surveillance over me. It was a strange feeling, almost as if he was testing me, studying me from a distance. He wasn't just a leader overseeing his team. His gaze transcended control, as if he knew much more about me than I would ever know about him. It unsettled me, but I continued, hoping it was just my imagination. Yet I knew something much greater was watching me there. There were moments when Musk would come closer, and his presence carried an almost physical pressure. He never smiled, and his words were few, precise, cold. He wasn't the friendly genius seen on camera and social media. His expressions revealed a weariness, but also something I could only describe as an inhuman detachment. He seemed colder than any leader I'd ever met, as if his worldview was beyond human understanding. I wondered if he even saw himself as one of us anymore. Those initial encounters left me increasingly disturbed. I had the feeling that Musk wasn't just an ambitious man. There was something deeper, something unsettling about his essence. I couldn't define what it was, but I knew he was involved in something that went beyond technology. There was an intensity about him that made me feel small, insignificant. Slowly, that feeling turned into fear, a growing, irrational fear that at some point, I would uncover what he was hiding from everyone. During the first months, the routine at Neuralink seemed ordinary. I did my rounds, checked the monitors, noted any relevant details, and ensured everything was secure. The scientists and engineers came and went, always immersed in their own tasks, as if they lived in a world apart. In the daylight, everything seemed in order, with the constant movement of employees. Neuralink seemed like an ordinary, albeit advanced, company. But as the sun set, the atmosphere transformed. At night, the corridors emptied, silent, and security took on a different weight. The monitor lights glowed with a bluish hue, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. The stillness was disturbing. There was something heavy in the air, as if the building itself was watching, breathing. I tried convincing myself it was just the solitude of the night shifts, but soon I realized this environment concealed much more. It was as if Neuralink changed, taking on a life of its own in the dark. There was a certain chill at night, a chill that couldn't be explained by air conditioning. Some nights, I felt a presence in the halls, something I could never see, but felt like a persistent shadow. I began to believe it was the effects of stress, or perhaps my mind trying to find patterns in the emptiness. But even with these excuses, the discomfort didn't lessen. There was a sense of something moving in the shadows, something that only revealed itself at night. One night, while patrolling one of the corridors, I heard a strange noise, like a sigh or a distant hum. I tried to locate its source, but all I found were dim lights and long shadows. The hum seemed to come from all sides, as if the building itself was producing the sound. I looked around but saw nothing. However, the feeling of being watched grew, an oppressive feeling that seemed to fill the air. From that night onward, I began to notice these presences more frequently. The work environment became increasingly uncomfortable, especially at night. I felt that, as I walked the corridors, something was lurking, as if the walls could see and hear. With each new round, the feeling of being observed intensified, and I knew something was wrong. I tried to stay calm, but the anxiety mounted, especially when passing the security cameras. Something was there, watching, and this wasn't just a paranoid idea. It was real. My nights at Neuralink became torturous. The weight of silence, the bluish glow of the lights, the constant chill, and the shadows that seemed to have a life of their own consumed me. There was an invisible presence, something I couldn't see but felt beside me at every step. I knew that company hid secrets, but at that point, I realized they were deeper and more inhuman than I had imagined. Something inside me already knew my life would never be the same. When I was promoted, the increase in responsibility brought a mixture of pride and apprehension. Gaining access to restricted areas meant that Neuralink trusted me to guard its most closely kept secrets. The areas I could now access were located in underground floors, a level of security unlike anything I had ever seen. The corridors were even colder, and the lights insufficient. The silence down there was total, so heavy it seemed to absorb even the sound of my footsteps. My curiosity grew, but so did the feeling that I was treading on forbidden ground. The first days in the restricted areas made me question what exactly I was protecting. The cameras seemed to catch movements that vanished quickly, like swift shadows disappearing as soon as I looked. There was also a peculiar smell, metallic, that bothered me more than I'd admit. With each visit, I felt less human, more like part of a strange experiment. The feeling of being watched grew, but I continued, trying to ignore the discomfort. I knew that what was there was far beyond me. The doors in these areas were heavier, made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Touching them sent a shiver down my spine, as if they were alive. During one of my rounds, I noticed that some rooms were locked with security systems I'd never seen before. Not even the regular security team had access to these places. They were chambers where supposedly only Musk and a select few could enter. I began to feel I was guarding more than just ordinary lab secrets. Something alive, almost pulsating, seemed to be locked within. Over time, I realized that each of these restricted areas housed something specific and frightening. Some doors led to corridors ending in strange labs with equipment I didn't have names for. In one of the rooms, I saw machines that appeared alive, shifting and molding as if they had their own will. It was all absurd, but there, in Neuralink's basement, I began to believe that science wasn't the limit. What they were hiding was inhuman, and Musk seemed to know exactly what he was doing. The discomfort became unbearable when I noticed that the few employees frequenting these areas never spoke to each other. They passed me as if I weren't there, as if they were part of Neuralink's very structure. Blank stares, expressionless faces, pale and tired. They were almost like automatons following a mechanical routine. I knew that wasn't normal, but I also understood that asking about these things wasn't an option. Neuralink seemed to have its own code of silence, and those who attempted to break it didn't last long. Access to these areas made me feel like I was on a one-way path. I was no longer the same, and I knew I was involved in something too dark to reveal. Neuralink was immersed in mysteries that didn't belong to this world, and by entering those forbidden corridors, I felt with each step I was being drawn deeper into an abyss. I found myself torn between curiosity and terror, but I knew I couldn't escape that reality. By then, I was already bound to something beyond comprehension. It was a silent night, like all the others, when something on the monitor caught my attention. I was doing my usual rounds, but the camera in one of the most restricted areas started picking up movement. I saw a group of men I'd never seen at Neuralink, dressed in dark suits and carrying strange objects. They seemed to know exactly what they were doing, moving in sync as if each had a crucial role in that operation. I went on high alert. They weren't scientists, they weren't security. They were something else. These men were carrying equipment I'd never seen before, and some of it emitted a faint blue glow. The images on the monitors were distorted, as if the devices themselves were affected by the presence of those artifacts. There was something terrifying about the objects they carried. They seemed to pulsate slightly, emitting an energy that interfered with the system. I watched, intrigued and horrified, as they walked toward one of the forbidden chambers. The air seemed thicker, and I knew I was witnessing something forbidden. The mysterious group approached the chamber door with frightening precision. They knew what they were doing, and without hesitation, opened the door that was supposed to be locked. None of us on the security team had access to that room, yet they entered without resistance. As soon as the door opened, I felt an oppressive sensation, almost as if an abyss had opened before me. That was no ordinary space, no simple laboratory. They were guarding something larger. After the men entered, the door closed with a dry thud, and the monitor screen went black for a few seconds. When the image returned, the corridor was empty. There was no sign of the men, the artifacts, or any movement. It was as if they had never been there. I checked the access logs, but there was nothing recorded, no entry, no sign the door had ever been opened. Cold sweat dripped down my forehead. I knew something horrible was being hidden there. I spent the next few hours in a state of extreme alert. Every noise, every shadow seemed to carry an invisible threat. I tried to forget what I'd seen, but the images of those mysterious men and strange artifacts wouldn't leave my mind. That night marked the beginning of a deep shift in my perception. There was no ignoring what I had witnessed. Neuralink was more than a tech company. It was a place where the impossible became real, and I was in the middle of this nightmare. In the nights that followed, every time I did my rounds, I felt their presence in every corner, as if the shadows were guarding their secrets. I knew that door concealed something beyond human understanding, something that should never have been seen. But what could I do? I was already too involved. Since that night, I feared someone would know I had witnessed that operation. My greatest fear was that they would come after me, and that what I had seen was just the beginning of something much darker. Days passed, and I began hearing rumors that only increased my unease. Employees disappeared without warning, especially after night shifts, and no one spoke about it. When someone vanished, it was as if they had never existed. Their belongings disappeared, and their names were never mentioned. The feeling that something was deeply wrong intensified with each new case. I started observing closely, noticing that many avoided looking directly at each other, as if sharing the same fear. These disappearances weren't openly discussed, but eventually, whispers filled the corridors. One night, I overheard two technicians talking about a scientist who had disappeared while working on confidential projects. They spoke in hushed tones, but I could tell they were terrified. One of them mentioned that anyone who asked too many questions would meet the same fate. That comment froze me inside. I knew I was also too close to Neuralink's secrets. The conversations I overheard at night were even more disturbing. Technicians reported that in the basement, there was a sector where brutal experiments were conducted. Some said screams could be heard at night, but they were quickly muffled. Most preferred not to comment, fearing their lives depended on silence. All of this created an atmosphere of paranoia, an environment where fear was palpable, and silence was the only form of protection. With each new disappearance, the workplace grew more tense and the fear spread like a disease. Employees started avoiding certain corridors, constantly looking over their shoulders. The most chilling rumor was that some who vanished hadn't been transferred, but replaced by something or someone. Some scientists seemed to return different, colder, with empty stares. It gave me chills. These weren't just rumors, they were distorted realities. The rumors of secret experiments began to mix with stories of sealed chambers where indescribable technologies were tested. Every night, I felt I was getting closer to the point of no return, and the more I tried to forget, the more these secrets revealed themselves. I was trapped between the desire to understand and the terror of knowing too much. Every missing employee seemed to be a silent message. Neuralink was willing to do anything to protect its secrets. These rumors and disappearances made me realize that Neuralink was a place where human lives seemed to have no value. The idea that they could erase someone at any moment to cover up their operations terrified me. I knew I should leave, but each night I felt more trapped, more powerless. What if I were the next to disappear? What if, at any moment, someone pulled me into the same fate as those who dared to know too much? I knew I was gambling with my own life. Some nights, something inexplicable began to happen. As I walked through the empty halls, I heard whispers coming from all sides. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks due to exhaustion. But the whispers continued, growing clearer, and they seemed to speak in a language I had never heard before. It was a guttural sound, charged with a strange energy. These voices paralyzed me with fear, a sense that something was trying to invade my mind. What was most disturbing was that these whispers didn't seem to come from outside. Instead, I felt they came from inside my head, as if someone were trying to communicate directly with my brain. I spent sleepless nights, tormented by these voices that echoed even in the absolute silence. When I tried to ask for help, I received indifferent looks and empty responses. People there seemed numb, oblivious to what was happening at night. It was as if only I could hear. Each time I made a round, I felt the voices growing stronger, especially near the more restricted areas. The lights flickered and elongated shadows formed on the walls, creating figures that seemed to have a life of their own. I felt a weight in the air, an oppression that took my breath away. I tried convincing myself it was just stress, but the more I ignored it, the more the voices intensified. They spoke, and I knew they were trying to tell me something, but I couldn't understand. I reached the point where I feared for my nights. The silence was no longer my friend. It seemed to amplify the whispers and intensify the shadows. I avoided patrolling near the restricted chambers because fear took hold of me. I felt a presence beside me, something I couldn't see but knew was there. The voices followed me, as if they had an urgency to warn me of something I couldn't yet understand. But at the same time, I felt they wanted to destroy me. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was only the emptiness of the corridor. However, the sound of footsteps continued, and sometimes I felt a shiver, as if an invisible hand was about to touch me. My heart raced and cold sweat trickled down my skin. With each round, it was as if I were approaching something fatal, something that might no longer be human. I began to feel that these voices were becoming part of me. The voices started penetrating my every thought, turning my nights into endless nightmares. I dreaded sleeping, as the figures and shadows now appeared even in my dreams. I felt as though I was being devoured from the inside out, as if something at Neuralink was trying to take my mind. The job that once seemed simple had now become a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The voices, the shadows, and the constant terror had become part of me, and I knew there was no escape. Everything changed the day Musk personally asked me to accompany him to one of the deepest sectors of Neuralink. That area was unknown even to most security guards, and access was reserved for a select group of people. When he called my name, I felt an inexplicable chill. I never imagined I'd have any direct contact with him, let alone for something so confidential. I obeyed, but every step I took beside him filled me with a sense of imminent danger, as if I were walking into a deadly trap. We descended corridors I'd never seen, deeper and more isolated. Upon arrival, we passed through a final security door, where I was instructed to leave all my electronic devices. As I entered the room, I was engulfed by absolute, almost oppressive silence. At the back, I could see tall, slender figures with gray skin and dark eyes. Those eyes. I'll never forget the feeling of emptiness and darkness they conveyed. They were beings I could never describe as human. They were unlike anything. Elon Musk walked toward them with the ease of someone who had known those creatures for a long time. I watched in silence as he seemed to converse with the beings, but not in any common language. It was something like distorted frequencies, vibrations that made me nauseous. I felt the presence of those beings penetrating my mind, as if their vibrations carried an incomprehensible, unbearable energy. It was clear that this encounter was not recent. Musk knew them well, and that terrified me deeply. As I watched, one of the beings brought a metallic sphere that floated, projecting complex geometric patterns onto the walls. I found myself unable to look away. Those luminous figures danced in the air, forming symbols that seemed to tamper with my perception. It was a technology beyond any human understanding, something that didn't belong to our world. My body froze, and a shiver ran down my spine. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was witnessing something forbidden, a secret no human should know. Musk watched the artifact with a strange gleam in his eyes, an almost disturbing satisfaction. The presence of the beings and that technology made me realize that Neuralink was never a simple innovation company. It was a portal to something larger and darker. I felt Musk was entirely committed to those beings, that he no longer saw any limits in his ambitions. The cold, unwavering gaze he cast at the floating sphere indicated he was ready to make any sacrifice, and I knew I could be next. Upon leaving that room, I felt as if something inside me had been ripped away, as if my soul had been contaminated by what I had seen. My body trembled, and my mind felt on the verge of collapse. I realized that encounter wasn't accidental. Musk wanted me to see, wanted to test me, wanted me to understand what he was willing to do. Since that day, I felt that the influence of those beings lingers within me, as if their vibrations left an indelible mark. After that experience, my days at Neuralink were never the same. I discovered that Hidden Room wasn't an exception. There were other sectors, other experiments conducted with alien technology. Scientists manipulated artifacts that defied all laws of physics. One time, I was called in and saw a researcher trying to dismantle a small sphere, similar to the one that floated in the presence of those beings. As soon as he touched it, a bright light engulfed him, disintegrating him in seconds. Not even dust remained, just an absolute void. The scientist's death didn't elicit shock or reaction from the others. It was as if it were expected. I saw that these sacrifices were a constant in the experiments they conducted. Neuralink itself seemed indifferent to the lives lost. Each scientist who disappeared was replaced without question. It was clear the company knew the risks, but continued onward. I was forced to watch, and each of these deaths left me more disturbed. I felt surrounded by people willing to do anything, even sacrifice their own lives. These experiments, however, weren't about learning, but about control. Musk wanted to understand those technologies to use them to his advantage, and human life was a small price to pay. One night, I witnessed another sacrifice. A scientist, involved in a device emitting a flickering light, had his arm slowly consumed, turning to dust before my eyes. He screamed, but no one helped. The look in Musk's eyes, watching the event, showed a satisfaction that chilled me. He seemed to view it all as progress. The equipment was indescribable, pieces that seemed alive, moving and reacting to touch as if they had their own intelligence. Testing these artifacts had become an obsession for Musk and his scientists. Each piece of that alien technology seemed to open up new possibilities, but at an unthinkable cost. Realizing what was truly happening, I felt a revolt and fear growing within me. It was more than science. It was a macabre alliance between humans and something beyond comprehension. With each new death, my own presence there felt more unsustainable. Musk knew I witnessed everything and never seemed to care. That terrified me. I felt that to him, I was just another disposable piece in his insane game. I realized that, at Neuralink, life's value was relative and anyone could be sacrificed at any moment. I knew that if I wasn't careful, I could be next to disappear in the name of experiments. The shadows of that lab were now embedded within me. I began to fear for my own sanity, my own soul. It was as if every scream, every sacrifice remained trapped inside me, a burden of horror I was forced to carry. The nights became unbearable as I relived each horrific detail, each sacrifice, each macabre experiment. I understood that nothing at Neuralink was casual or innocent. I was trapped in a dark game, where human life was disposable and alien technology was a forbidden power Musk didn't hesitate to dominate. From the moment I understood what was happening, I began planning my escape. I knew that if I stayed, I would end up losing my life, or worse yet, my sanity. I spent weeks studying the cameras, the movement of security, tracing an escape route. I knew my only chance was during one of the meetings with the alien beings. At those times, security was focused on the restricted sector, and the corridors were empty. Finally, on a moonless night, I put my plan into action, heart pounding and hands trembling. The corridors I'd patrolled countless times now seemed endless. Every noise, every shadow amplified my paranoia. I knew if they caught me, there would be no mercy. The lights flickered, casting shadows that stretched across the floor, as if they were trying to grab me. Cold sweat ran down my forehead, and I forced myself to keep going. With each step, I felt as though something were pursuing me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When I finally reached the exit, the relief was almost overwhelming. I felt like I'd escaped a nightmare. However, that relief was short-lived. Just minutes after my escape, I sensed something following me. It wasn't physical, but a presence, a feeling that wouldn't go away. I knew Musk and those beings wouldn't let me escape so easily. I tried to calm my mind, but paranoia took hold of me. I knew that, even outside Neuralink, the danger was still lurking. I went to a cheap motel, far from the city, trying to disappear. But each day, my paranoia only grew. I began seeing parked cars, people watching from afar, and the phone would ring at night, but no one was on the other end. My mind was unraveling, and every sound was a threat. Neuralink's shadow seemed to surround me from all sides. I knew I wasn't safe. They were watching, waiting for the right moment to silence me. The feeling of being pursued became unbearable. I was trying to flee from something invisible, something that was inside my mind. The voices I'd heard at Neuralink now whispered even louder, as if they were trying to break my sanity. I couldn't sleep, for the dreams turned into nightmares where Musk and those beings watched me, smiling, satisfied. The weight of what I'd seen and heard consumed me. I felt my escape was just an illusion. I realized that, even outside Neuralink, I was still trapped. My life had become a cycle of paranoia, fear, and constant vigilance. I no longer knew what was real and what was the result of my tormented mind. Every night, I awaited their arrival, Musk and his allies ready to silence me. Now, I understand that once inside Neuralink, no one truly escapes. No matter how far I run, the terror haunts me, embedded in my soul. In the days that followed my escape, I tried to stay anonymous, moving from motel to motel to avoid any kind of tracking. But even far away, the feeling of being watched persisted. Whenever I left my room, I'd see the same cars parked nearby, men in discreet suits watching from a distance. They were silhouettes that blended with the shadows, almost invisible. I knew they were Neuralink's agents, and the paranoia intensified daily. It was as if I had left the company, but the company had never left me. The phone calls began soon after, always at night. I'd answer, but there was no response on the other end. The call would stay active for minutes, filled only by suffocating silence. It seemed like something or someone was trying to invade my mental space, forcing me to relive everything I'd witnessed at Neuralink. These silent calls were a reminder that wherever I went, the shadow of Musk and his macabre secrets was always behind me. The terror that they could find me at any moment consumed me. The paranoia started manifesting in my daily routine. Every face I saw on the street seemed suspicious. Every step behind me seemed like a chase. In the motel, I'd check the room for hidden cameras, microphones, any device they might have installed to monitor me. The feeling of being observed intensified with each day. I slept with a chair against the door and one eye open, fearing that at any moment someone could break in and drag me back to that chamber of horrors. As days passed, I noticed signs that I wasn't alone. Strangers would inquire about me at the reception, different cars parked near the motel, always with the engine running. The silent calls became more frequent, and sometimes I thought I could hear breathing on the other end, a faint noise, barely perceptible, but enough to set me on high alert. I knew I was being watched, and it slowly ate away at my sanity. One night, I saw a shadow pass by my window. I tried to see who it was, but no one was outside. Still, I heard footsteps in the corridor, footsteps that stopped in front of my door and lingered for a few seconds. The terror of being captured intensified. That presence outside was like a silent sentence, and I knew my attempt at escape was nearing its end. Each day, my life seemed more fragile, as if I were on the edge of an abyss. Despite all the signs, I continued fighting to stay invisible, but I knew that Neuralink was closing in on me with every step. My mind was already broken, my body exhausted, and my hope destroyed. The whispers I heard at night intensified, as if telling me there was nowhere left to run. What I experienced at Neuralink would never let me find peace, and wherever I was, I knew they would come. It was only a matter of time. The whispers that I once heard only inside Neuralink's facilities now followed me day and night. They were voices that appeared out of nowhere, whispering things I couldn't understand, but which echoed in my head, becoming a part of me. I felt that something had implanted itself in my mind during my time at Neuralink, maybe an implant, an unknown technology, that continued to track and control me. It was as if I were under constant surveillance, even without any visible sign of tracking. At first, I thought it was just paranoia, but the voices became so present, so intrusive, that I could no longer deny something was wrong. The words they whispered made no sense, but they seemed to be trying to communicate with me. I began questioning my own sanity, doubting what was real and what was the product of a manipulated mind. I felt something within me was no longer under my control, as if I were a puppet in the hands of invisible forces. Each night was torture. The voices seemed to come alive, intensifying in the dark, repeating phrases that felt programmed to break my resistance. I tried to ignore them, but it was impossible. They seeped into my thoughts, like an alien presence inside my head. The exhaustion and lack of sleep grew, and my mind began to unravel bit by bit. Something was implanted in me, something that monitored my thoughts and kept me under Neuralink's control. The whispers began tormenting me even when I was awake. I started hearing the voices in broad daylight, in the most unexpected places. Some words sounded familiar, as if they were direct commands to my mind. Each time I tried to ignore them, I felt a crushing pressure in my head, a pain that forced me to listen. I could no longer distinguish where my thoughts ended and the voices began, and the idea of losing my own identity terrified me. It didn't take long for me to start questioning my own perception of reality. Had I really escaped? Or was this all a simulation? The mental control that Neuralink had over me seemed absolute, as if every move was observed and every thought manipulated. I felt my own mind was bending to the will of something greater, something I could never overcome. Escape felt like a cruel illusion. Perhaps I had never left. The voice whispered incessantly, telling me I was still there, that I would never escape. It was relentless psychological torture, an assault that ate away at me from the inside. Every attempt to flee those whispers failed, and I realized I was trapped forever. Neuralink's alien technology wasn't just a tool, it was an invisible shackle, and I was merely a piece in an endless experiment. I no longer owned my mind. By now, my life had become an endless cycle of fear, paranoia, and despair. There wasn't a moment of peace, for I knew at any moment, something or someone could come for me. What I saw and lived through at Neuralink left permanent marks on me, turning my days into a continuous nightmare. I had been exposed to secrets no human should know, and now my reality seemed distorted, fragmented. It was as if my life was an illusion, something that could be erased at any moment. I desperately tried to find an explanation for what was happening to me. Was my mind being controlled, or was it all a result of the trauma Neuralink inflicted on me? Each night was a battle against the terror consuming me, but the truth was I no longer knew what was real. The voices, the shadows, the memories of the alien beings and forbidden technology, everything mixed into a chaos that seemed to drive me toward madness. Looking around, I saw that the world seemed to go on normally, as if what I had experienced never happened. People walked the streets, oblivious to the horrors Musk and his company hid. But I knew that there were dark and inhuman forces behind that facade of innovation and progress. Neuralink hid something far greater, something incomprehensible, and I was a lone witness to all that horror, a witness who would never find peace. My sanity was hanging by a thread, and each night I wondered if it was worth continuing. Would I ever be able to free myself? Or was I doomed to live under the control of the voices, the constant surveillance, and the memories that would never leave me? Reality had become a maze from which I couldn't escape. More and more, I felt that my fate was sealed, and that there was nowhere left to run. Perhaps my only choice was to accept the inevitable end. In my moments of greatest despair, I realize I am just an insignificant piece in something vast and incomprehensible. Musk and his alien allies have a plan, an agenda that goes far beyond my understanding. They don't care about human lives, they don't care about our existence. I am just an unwanted witness, someone who went too far and is now marked. I feel them closing in on me with every passing second, waiting to erase me. The only certainty I have left is that my life, since the moment I entered Neuralink, no longer belongs to me. Everything I saw and heard is a weight I'll never be able to bear without breaking. I don't know how much longer I can live on the edge of insanity, knowing I'm being hunted by something beyond human understanding. Perhaps death is my only escape, but as long as I breathe, the truth about Neuralink, Elon Musk, and their alien secrets will live with me, condemning me to an existence without peace.